Manager 23's beta has been out for like 2 weeks now, and the full game comes out in a couple of days. I've played one full season with Sevilla on my Twitch stream, which if you weren't there, what are you doing? The link is down in the description. How dare you? That's not the point. That's not why we're here, because Football Manager 23... I'm gonna hit it off the top. I am incredibly frustrated at the lack of improvements to international management. Now, if you watch the video with that thumbnail, you already know that I played the alpha and I noticed they didn't make any changes. I am just amazed that when the game is coming out a week and a half, 2 weeks before the World Cup actually starts, that they didn't decide to address that at all. Amazed, absolutely amazed. And while I'm here, set pieces haven't really changed much in functionality either. And in that video where I'm talking about it, I wasn't sure because I hadn't played around enough. Well, now I've played a full season in the game, and the set pieces offer virtually the same functionality. They have a slightly different UI, but everything else works the same. And that's a shame for me, because I feel like the most potential to improve in the game is outside of the graphics, the set pieces. Because what do you do on the training ground? What do announcers say? What a beautiful set piece has been worked. Well, they worked on that in the training ground. And who's in charge of that? Me, and this beautiful mustache. I'm there. Zed Lasso, locked in. Ow, what the? Dude, how'd you get hurt? So I was filming this video. That's not the meat of this video. We have a lot of things to talk about, including the match engine, but we start with the UI improvements, and that's what I'll call them, the quality of life improvements that Football Manager 23 has introduced. And I feel like they came up short here as compared to past years, at least in the beta version. The main part of this is the squad planner, this idea that you can plug your squad in and you can project it out the next couple of seasons, who's going to be playing what position, who's under contract. Now, I'm not surprised to find myself not using this a whole lot. I visualize it in my head, but I'm not the sort of person that needs to visually see it in the game. And honestly, things like the experience matrix, I think, are less massive new useful feature and more something I probably could have created in the Zealand skin, which will be coming out with the full version of the game, the link to which will be below this video if you're watching it after the 8th of November. It's this thing where we redecorate the game. It's pretty cool. If there's really one thing these UI improvements are missing, is they're not necessarily presenting us any new helpful information at all. I mean, if I wanted to see who was still on my team, they actually had a filter that was in the game last year where you go into your squad, you go up here and you go down to future playing time. And then in future playing time, you can see who's under contract into the future seasons and even what their promised playing time is. Now, past year's UI improvements like the development center, which I admittedly don't use either, still seemed to present more useful information. You're getting development advice from various members of your staff on who needs attention, wants to watch, right? All these different takes on your youth teams. You can go to a loans page and get a pretty detailed breakdown with more information than you could get in the past. You click on each of these players, right? And then I don't use the development center a lot. You might use it a ton, you might not use it at all, but it did help organize and present new information, not just information that could already be found. I mean, essentially they just reskinned certain elements of the squad section and they took the team reports out of squad and they put them into Squad Planner, because that's what's over here, is you get these various reports that you used to have available elsewhere. But to be clear, there's nothing wrong with the Squad Planner. It is a cool thing to add to the game, but it is more minor than other UI changes or new panels added on the left side in the past. And I'm really just looking out for improving your quality of life. And you know who else does that? The longtime sponsor of this channel, NordVPN. Now hold on, you might have heard me say NordVPN a lot, and that's because they've sponsored this channel for a long time, but it could be something you're not familiar with, or you're like me, you're really lazy and you don't necessarily want to use. But NordVPN not only is very cheap, but it's very user-friendly. What it does is protect your internet traffic by routing it through somewhere else in the world. First of all, just look at this wonderful UI, drop-down menu. You can yeet yourself anywhere. They even have an app for your phone. And it also gives the added benefit that if you are traveling, somebody like me that travels a lot, and you want to go watch a particular sporting event, watch a particular TV show, you can send your internet traffic through that area and watch the show from there. And if that all sounds appealing to you, there's actually some wonderful news. You can get an exclusive 2-year deal, plus you can get 4 months free and a 30-day money-back guarantee by clicking on the link at the top of the description. That's right, 30 days, 30-day money-back guarantee. If you pick it up and you're like, he lied, this is ridiculous, which, spoilers, I didn't, but you can give it back, 30 days. All the time you need to realize that it's very simple, effective, inexpensive, and something that in the modern world you really shouldn't live without. And something that NordVPN is very good with is analytics, and that's something that the game has taken a step to improve in FM23, and this is not something that I have a problem with at all. I think Football Manager's plan is to slowly add analytics to the game over time to replicate real life, and this is not a bad thing. They're adding it in increments. Once they're functional, they add the next batch. Now, last year they weren't 100% functional. We found out because we pushed the game to the limit with that whole Moneyball video thing we did, but the majority were very functional and allowed you to play the game based off analytics alone, and they've added more analytics to that. They present you with more and more data like formations used versus formations you've faced and all this different stuff that can help you if you really want to sink your teeth into it. And I know a lot of you are psychos that really want to sink your teeth into it. So the analytics have been buffed, and I think will continue to be buffed for years to come. No complaints about them, and I appreciate the improvement. But how about a striking thing that I've noticed? The licensing, I think, is really cool. So Football Manager couldn't say enough that it had acquired the licensing to European competitions. That means mainly if you're playing the game, the Champions League in Europe is going to have not only an incredibly fancy draw screen that looks like this, that is immersive and just feels fantastic. It gets you out of a set piece simulator, but it also has this fabulous match day presentation. Presentation is great, and I love things that immerse myself and my team and make me feel even more like I'm being a manager in the first place, because that's what we're all here to be. And this is why we should have better graphics at Football Manager, and I'm definitely not going to get into that in this video, whatever. Twitter. I'm lightheaded. But the licensing scores is above average, something that I didn't expect to impress me, that makes Football Manager 23 better. And while that was incredibly overhyped, there's actually an underhyped feature and something they haven't really talked about much at all unless you read a lot of the fine print about the new game. Those are the agent interactions. This is sorely needed because there are a lot of different parts of interactions in Football Manager that become formulaic, and they sometimes become illogical because they are formulaic, and even though you might be an inch away or have an explanation for the reason you're doing something, you can't tell that person in the game that is why you're doing it. And I ran into a fabulous example of this. I had a player ask for a new contract, a guy named Kareem Rekic. Now, Kareem Rekic wanted a new contract, and I felt like, even though he probably didn't deserve it, I was going to give it to him anyways because it wasn't too much more expensive. We go through the entire negotiation process, and we have a falling out eventually and no success. Now, an option was then presented to me right here, where I could go back to the agent and attempt to convince the agent to come back to the table. An incredibly realistic, and in my situation here, trying to prevent a dynamics meltdown, very important thing to be doing. So I tried to convince him. It worked. We went back to the negotiating table and negotiated a new contract. Now, this is where we ran into the whole it's a beta part of things where it was actually glitched, so the contract I offered didn't necessarily go through. But the premise of it's Football Manager, what can you do? The premise of the interaction is great. And there are a couple of other parts to this, like when you're negotiating a transfer, you can feel out the wage demands of a player and actually negotiate them up or down, as well as their expected playing time before even making an offer. That's awesome. They should have talked about it more. For me, really changes the feel of the transfer market, and the agent is placed more at the forefront, which I think we all are aware is more the case in real life. Sorry, Mike. But the dynamics are still the same, and the dynamics are still annoying, and I'm specifically talking about promises. There are still those little illogical hiccups, and I wanted to include this in the video for one reason. If you aren't making a promise that you can 100% guarantee you will keep, I mean factually guarantee you will keep. I'm not talking sign a friend or sign a new striker. I'm talking about play me in these certain number of games or win a competition. Those are the only promises that you should take. Everything else, the ones you can't 100% guarantee, do not take them or you will end up like this. It's the next transfer window! What is that? It is amazing that I have so much fun playing this game given the crazy stuff that has happened. I mean, next 3 years, I'm never even testing out a promise. But finally, we are to the match engine, which I really am looking forward to talking about. Full disclosure, Nick Madden, who makes the match engine, is a friend of mine. And you know that because he's come on the video before to talk about the glitches in the match engine. Also want you to know that doesn't affect the way that I talk about it, but I'll start with the good. The match engine is a significant improvement. I know this because I went back and played FM23 FM22. I do this every year. You go back and play the previous version after playing a season in the beta, and you notice the difference right away. The first touches in the match engine are incredibly dynamic. Just look at a first touch in FM22 compared to a first touch in FM23. The ball feels like it can go any direction in Football Manager 23. The touches are much more dynamic. The ball's popping up in the air. They're chesting it down. They're kneeing it down. They're juggling it through traffic, Messi style, right? They have those options that weren't there in FM22. And part of the result of this is the finishing is much more dynamic. There's a much wider variety of goals. I mean, just look at the goals that are going in FM23, and this was in just one season, and these are goals that I didn't really see in FM22. FM22, it was more stale, and particularly 1v1s were more stale. A part of that, as you might have noticed in the goals that you're watching from FM23, is the goalkeepers much more dynamic. Now, people have been hating on the goalkeepers. I actually want to push back on that, because in real life, the ball can hit a goalkeeper and still go in. And in Football Manager 22 or anyone previous, that didn't really happen. In FM23, the ball can hit a goalkeeper and still go in. Off the hands, off the leg, and more chaos. And goalkeepers will actually defend 1v1s much better. They come out, spread their legs, do the whole world-class know your throw your foot at it sort of operation. And that makes the 1v1s in particular a point of much contention for every Football Manager fan everywhere. Much better. They feel much more realistic. And of course, there's chaos in the midfield. The looser touches, the larger variety of finishes is produced by the fact that there are a lot more interceptions. Those loose touches, players getting onto them, bad flat passes. Even though you might want to blame the match engine for that, the vast majority of the time it's just because your player made a bad play or their player made a good play, and overall the match engine feels much more realistic. Up until the bad part that I'm going to talk about. The balls in the air, the match engine is just not great at positioning defenders or balls in the air. Now, I don't know, because I can't see behind the code, whether this is because the actual match engine is struggling to deal with the ball in the air, or the visual representation of the match engine is struggling to deal with the ball in the air. So the player is not moving in a way that seems realistic, even though they're supposed to be over here, if you understand the difference. But honestly, it doesn't matter, because either way, you're going to look at this. Dude. Look at where Nianzu is when this ball is hit. Look at where he is when the ball is received. And you're gonna be mad, like I was. And it is a beta, so I hope that they can iron these things out once the full game is released on November 8th. Use the data from everybody playing it to do so. But I think it might be a deeper issue with the mapping to players, because in certain counterattacks, I've seen players in almost a FIFA way be moving towards an offensive attacking player, and then once another player on your team starts moving towards them, they back off, as if the marking system is saying, oh, you got him, even though that player's in on goal if this other guy gets out of the way, but that other guy starts getting out of the way, opens up a lane, and the shot comes in. That can be incredibly infuriating, and might be the underlying reason they struggle with balls in the air, is that the mapping of defenders to offensive attacking players leads to some illogical decisions, where you should just be throwing yourself at an attacking player to cut off the incredibly obvious goal scoring opportunity, but instead you're giving way to a ball winning midfielder who's trying to make a recovery run that's never going to work, even though you are already in position. Another real issue for me in the match engine is that, look, if you don't change the AI in set pieces, fine, but on wide free kicks towards the corner, your team defaults to corner defense tactics, but doesn't react out of the zone the same way. So you end up with, here we've got a line of 5 guys, and here we've got a couple of guys that are about to score and make you angry again. I was able to confirm this during my Sevilla streams because I had everybody on go back, and everybody on go back doesn't look like that. That is the 5-man zone that is very effective when defending against corners, but on free kicks it doesn't react the same way. I have no idea why the wide, deep free kick ends up with corner defense. Hopefully it's something that can be fixed easily. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But I also don't know why it's in the game, because that's something that I have no control over, because I'm not going to change my effective corner defense. So those are my main issues with the match engine. There is something else that you should know. There was a huge player development bug. Now it's largely been patched out, but people are doing simulations into the future tests, and where, something to look out for, something to be aware of, and perhaps a reason to create a save point at the end of every year for something that may be patched in the future. Because at the beginning of the beta, you were getting players that look like this. Dr. Benji tweeted this out, and if you simulate it into the future, I feel like the athleticism and the technique should have developed a little bit, and clearly it did not. Now again, this has largely been patched out of the game, but some residual effects might still be in development, and if this becomes an issue past the November 8th. Rest assured, I'll be investigating and making a video about it, but hopefully, because this is the beta, it will be patched out. My overall impression of FM23 so far is that the backlash is mostly justified. This is not a significant improvement to the game. The graphics, as I've started the conversation on Twitter, are still well behind the 8 ball to not be improving the other facets of the game as much as they are. Now, the match engine is a significant improvement to the game, and if they can sand out some of those mapping issues so that your player looks like they're at least operating more logically when they're making a mistake, it could be worth getting the game on its own. But my impression of FM23 is less of an improvement that we've seen in past years. I'm not very high on the game. People were asking me during the beta if they should get it. My advice is to hold off to see how it plays after November 8th. But I'll change the mood. If you want to watch me visit my Football Manager 22 club in real life, here is a video of me doing just that. I attend a match, I meet the sporting director, the entire club. It was an absolute blast, and I ended up in the middle of some sort of celebratory circle I didn't understand. Yeah, it's fun watching me be awkward, I think. Enjoy.